Okay, so my name is Jonatas. I am a developer advocate at Timescale, and I come from the Ruby ecosystem. And today I'm very happy to continue this session that we are going to improve the Timescale helpers that we did in the previous session. So here I was just running it to confirm that everything is working. So looks like the script is okay. And let's just recap what we have here. So I will be just zooming a bit more here so we can better see the code. And let's go step by step. So this part doesn't matter for now. And what we have here is a small all-in-one example how to run Timescale with a single Ruby script. So our idea here is just to set up one table and feed it with some data and also do some queries around it and see how it goes. So the step that we have here is we are using ActiveRecord here and we are establishing this connection. It's using a cloud-based system here in my case. So and I wrap this event table. So how we wrap the event table? We have a kind of migration script here, and then we introduce some new method that can digest hypertable options. So here you can just have the boilerplate for creating the hypertable and also adding compression and compression policies. So the idea here is that when you pass create table, then we also we override the create table to also digest hypertable options. So what's the hypertable options today? Time column, time bucket interval, compress segment by, and compression interval. So this is like compression settings. This is like time bucket settings. So how Timescale is going to split the chunk. So for example, in this case, 1 minute is quite small because we are just running a small test, but you can consider like 1 week or 1 month depending how intensive is your application on data. So the idea here is that you can just use create hypertable and create table, and then you can use the hypertable key to put the rest of the options that you want. So this is like all-in-one script, so just showing some proof of concept, and it has some event creation here to show how it would looks like. And we also have some small queries here to just show what it looks like. And here we explore a bit of the internals of the hypertable. So chunks is the fragment of a hypertable. So when you start inserting data when time-based, so you have a column, like in our case we are using the created at column, and so if the created at changes the minute, it will create another subtable. And for example, if you have a lot of data, and let's say you have like 10,000 devices inserting data in the same second, so maybe you have like a minute-based one. In this case, like this is not very realistic, but the idea was that if I introduce like a few 100 records, I could see the minute changing, and then I can just show several chunks instead of just one. As we are using the created at column, we don't have, let's say, control over it, so we don't use it as a param when we use the event create here, so it will be a bit different. And the idea of this session is that we are first going to reorganize this code to not be here, because here is not the right place. So this is like a reusable options that we can do, and open a new tab here and go to the same folder. and I will run it once more to just show it in action to you, so you can see all the steps why we talk about it and we have it running. Okay, let me just resize my screen and see if everything is going fine. So I see you have a few people, so if you have any comments, anything to share, please feel free to join to our chat, and I will try to also bring the discussions here, and we can learn all together. Okay, so what we have now. So we introduced everything, we created the table, we created the hyper table, and now we are going to decouple this code so we can reuse it into a Rails app or into whatever we want. As let's say Timescale is a SQL company, we are not going to create the gem or maintain it, but if you like the idea, feel free to create it and maintain, and we can probably help and contribute. We just don't want to push it ourselves, as we are not maintaining Rails app. So maybe people will have different opinions on how to make it or how to declare. I have several years working with Ruby and Rails, and I'm trying to make it more convenient to be decoupled from the Rails ecosystem and just build functions that you can introduce whatever you want, and it will do what we need behind the scenes. Okay, so for creating a module in Ruby is quite simple. So we can just say, for example, module. Oops, I'm not going to declare it here, of course. So let me move it outside. And here we are in the kernel level. So we can just say here module, and we can say Timescale. And then we can have an inner module because we can organize more Timescale functions here. So let's say it will be migration helpers. Okay, so don't know what I configured here to just be reducing everything, but yeah, the functions are pretty simple to understand. And what we have here is so let's just indent this code, and we can also do some small document that we can say useful methods to run Timescale DB in your Ruby app. Migration helpers can help you to set up hypertables by default, and this digest hypertable options is some name that maybe we can make it public and just say create a hypertable with, and then we pass the hypertable name and the hypertable options. So if the person wants to declare it, they can also use it in the same way, or we can reuse it here. So yeah, digest hypertable options is also a good name, but we can just say, for example, setup maybe. Setup hypertable options. Okay, now we can say setup hypertable options instead of this. Okay, and the next thing is that this is not available here, so we should include it inside ActiveRecord. So let's say I am in another environment, I would have something like class dot include, and then I can say Timescale migration helpers, and that's the basic steps we need to do here. I would like to just create a small documentation as we have like a good example here, so it's easy to just go from this, and then we can make it available here. So the first one that we are going to document is this one, so people can reuse it. And let me just align the beginning of the line. We can override it with some space, and then put something here. So this is an code sample. Okay, and then now we can just say example here. Yes, then we can say create argument. So we can just say that the create table method, let's say here, use this as the name, and we can just move this down and just have the setup one here, so we can also document it. Set type hypertable. Hypertable options could become even like a hash, like a named params, and we could accept new instead of like keeping these options. So yeah, probably we can just think about it, but let's make it work first. So we can better see it in action. Okay, so we have the hypertable options here, and we have some basic documentation, and to turn into hypertable is simpler. So let's keep it as it is now. So we set up hypertables, and then we have this module that we include directly in the connection. That's where we have it. So if I just try it again, if it runs, we are good to go. Yay, it works. So now it's up to us to, for example, if I would like to reuse it in a Rails application, I can put it like in a config initializers folder, so it will be inside it. So for example, here is our Timescale helpers, right? So now we can also turn it there. So let me drop it here. New Timescale helpers.rb. Okay, require. We don't need to require nothing here, but we need to require in the previous one now. So we can come here and say require relative, and then we can say Timescale helpers. Okay. Nice. So now we have the timescale helpers here, and we moved it to another file, so it's easy to do things, and maybe we'll have some issue here with the timescale helpers because in this line we have this inclusion, so probably this is not a good idea to keep it here because we can inject this code whatever we want. And for example, here when I call connection, I am already getting the first connection from the pool, so I need to have the authentication, and you can see here that the authentication comes one line later, so that's not a very good idea to keep this here for now. So let's move this back and let's make it after the connection. So we can also test it to not be just like saying things. So let's just move it again and try. Yeah, we have this connection not established, but we can hack it. So what we can do here to hack it is like we can require relative later, but instead of just requiring, we are going to go to the right place to find what class we want. So let me put 𝗏 here and let's try allowing one again. So now we can see ActiveRecord base.connection, and this is a class. So yeah, this is the Postgres adapter. So yeah, my credentials will be replaced in a minute. Yeah, that's not a big deal here. So what we are going to do here, we can do this thing, include, and then is this thing here. Yeah, so probably if we try this now, we are not going to have any issues because we are just extending the right class. We were hacking before and just using the connection that is like a shortcut to the class. So as you see here, we don't need the .class.include now. We can just include it directly. So let's see if it works. Oops, sorry, let me stop it. Okay. It says that require relative initialized constant. Sorry, my terminal is so big here. Okay, Postgres adapter is not defined at that point. So what we can do is require it. So let's discover how can we require this thing. So require ActiveRecord / connection adapters / Postgres. Let's move it to the beginning of this file because this is what's required to inject on this module. So let's see if we get it. Yay, it works. Cool. So we are in a better state now. We have a file that is independent and can also, let's say, help with this part. And we achieved the first part of this session that was extracting it, creating in a kind of module. If we want to just dump everything into a gem and redistribute, it's much easier now. And yeah, so we are making good progress. So the next thing that we can do now is we can go for this chunk thing that is more related to allow people to use these scope chunks, for example. And then that's a kind of, let's say, possibility that we can also transform it into some abstract code that we can reuse. So instead of let's say we can start piling a lot of different scopes or whatever we want to inject here. So we can do it using I'm sorry, we can reuse it using like include or extend inside this ActiveRecord class, and then we can say extend hypertable, and then it knows everything, and we can ask about chunks, we can ask about whatever we want. So this step is that's the next idea. As we did the first Timescale helper for migrations, now we can also do it for this. Okay, so let's try to think about what we need to do here. So the first thing is like this scope looks like a concern or something that like this on the Rails and Active Support ecosystem. So let's just visit this on a browser, and I will be just searching here for this. Just a moment. Okay. Okay, so active support concern. Yeah. So basically you can see here the example that shows disabled as a kind of scope that can be reused. And then like you can use this, let's say, witchcraft that you can do from the Ruby metaprogramming. But active support concern also includes this idea that you can just extend this module and you can see included or class methods, and it will be much easy to maintain. So let's try it. Let's try to include this and also be looking how it works from this perspective. So what we are going to move is these scope chunks. So let's go to Timescale helpers, and here we start with module migration helpers, and then now we are going to have a module that will be related to hypertables. So to ActiveRecord and this kind of thing. So let's call it something. I am very bad with names, so if anyone has any suggestion, I will call it hypertable. So we can say helpers, and then we can just extend hypertable helpers, and we can just consider that this is our first thing. As we can see here in the browser, we just need to wrap this into included, do blah blah blah, and we need to also do this extend. So let's copy these two lines to start, and then we basically need to call it here. Oops, sorry. Okay, and now we have another problem, because we also have here the chunk. So if you see here, we use this model that is not available yet. So we will need to just find a way to make it. Let's see. We are going to need to move chunk here. So if we have these inner modules and I create a module here, it will work if I just dump this class here. So let's find the chunk class and move it there. Let's see if it works. And we will have this. This is cool because I'm going to put it in the end, and you can see that basically this is like a timescale chunk, so it will work well and will be very useful for this. So let me try now. So as we move the chunk and as we have the hypertable now, we have the hypertable helpers. So as you can see here, this in this way I I basically, when I use the method, I can just include, as far as I get, I can basically include my method later. So let's try to include it. So here I have a few scopes. I prefer to put includes before this kind of macros. Include timescale hypertable helpers. Okay, so now let's see if our all-in-one runs. Okay, I don't have it. Okay, for some reason it says that hypertable helpers is not available. So let's try to just confirm. This is the end of migration helpers, and here I have hypertable helpers. Okay, what I'm trying here is include. I think this is extend, not include, sorry. But for some reason, when I use here timescale and then migration helpers, it should be timescale hypertable helpers. Let's try again. Okay, so we have a kind of problem here. So it's in the line 15, and let's debug it. I love debugging with Pry. This is my favorite tool, and I learn a lot here. So I can try here timescale, and then I can see hypertable. Constants. Migration helper. My second module here. I just need to confirm again that I closed everything right. Yes, and it looks like I closed, and the name is right, but for some reason it's not accepting 2. Let's just try to move it to another place. Let's create the hypertable helpers. So we can say here module timescale, and then say hypertable helpers. Then we can rename it later to migration helpers to make it clear. And now in theory we will have access to it. I don't know what's going wrong that it's not accepting the both things there. If I do here like io.read, probably enforce it. Let's get the file here, timescale helpers. And I can even continue on this session and just say require relative, and try now this timescale. Cannot load file, timescale hypertable helpers. I didn't save the file before. So yes, now it says that I'm missing some end here. Yes, it's of course something I missed, and now I have it. Yeah, and if I try now timescale.constants, I have it there, and I also have the chunks and everything I need there. So let's see if it works. Yeah, looks like it will work. Let's just run it completely. So, and let me remove the debug here. Okay, so the end will be what is important here, because what we did here was just related to have these chunks, and you can see here like decompressing and compressing use the chunks. So if this failed, yay, it failed. So we still don't have it working as we expected. So instead of keep fighting with the full script, we can just go and see it one by one, error by error, and trying it directly from the command line. Oops. Okay, so let's go here, and the first thing that failed was on this event. We extended it with the hypertable options, and it says that when we use .chunks, it does not work because defined method chunks. So we need to understand why the scope was not injected as we expected. So basically we included, and I think it here, let me just confirm. Let's get the reference to the M module. Yeah, so you can do like this, and then you can include it. Yeah, it's not extend, it's include. So that was my fault. I was switching to different directions. Yeah. Okay. Now let's see. Ooh, we even like used everything from chunk. It found the chunk, and it found especially like on this thing is interesting because we are, let's say, sharing this space with this chunk thing that is a kind of view, and we also have like functions inside, and we are mixing here this. So yeah, that's very, very cool. And yeah, so now it's much simpler. If we look into everything we build here, we have like much better options, and we can even create like something very basic for these queries, because this can also be hypertable helpers. So let's move there. It's cool stuff. Like we say, basically everything that uses created at, and this created at is the options that we want. So it will be interesting to keep. And one thing that maybe it's worth to start storing is this part, because we are actually, let's say, using this, but it's not based on a configuration. It's based on something else. It's based on a static value. So if we use a different column name, it will not be great. It will not be what we exactly want. But as we know that people breathe the Rails defaults, probably that's what people want. So yeah, let's move it in this first instance. So it will be quite simple step, and let's just pile it here together with the scope of the chunks, because yeah, they are all in the same boat. They even use chunks in some situations. So yeah, that's cool stuff. And that's things that you can just think that will make your code much simpler, like this. And for example, this even the primary key here, maybe we could try to make it different, but for now it's much better. So as you can see, now we have the timescale helpers, we have hypertable helpers, and we moved everything that we have to this helper. And now we also, let's say, don't have anything here that will be let's say not clear, like you just say the options and everything. So it looks much better. And from this counts per blah blah blah, so it will bring out the details, and yeah, all by default in any hypertable that you want. So yeah, cool stuff. Okay, so let's see now what we have here. If we get timescale chunk.all, so as you can see here, this is the chunks that I mentioned before, and you can see by default it's like 1 week, and for some reason it's not respecting the params that we want. So that's also something that we can be investigating. Let's just confirm, because we were saying it here, time bucket interval. Oh, this is a compression interval every 7 days, but time bucket interval is supposed to be here. And okay, so for some reason we are not using the time bucket interval as an option here. We just completely forget about it. So let's move it, and let me break down the lines here so we can make it. And what we are building here is options for hypertable. So this is the second param, okay, and we are always passing the created at, but we can keep the default. So after this param, we are going to have something else here, and this will be the option that we missed. So interval time bucket interval. I don't remember timescale create hypertable. Okay, so what's arguments chunk time interval? Yeah, so this is the right name. If event time that each chunk covers. Default is 1 month. Maybe the default change it. Okay, oh yeah, must be default is now 7 days. Okay, so that's the one that we need to pass. So chunk time interval. So let's also make this as replace it, because the name is wrong here. So I would say that it's much better if we just use the names that are what we want. So let's rename it. So hypertable options is also a very big name. Options. So it will be chunk time bucket interval. Chunk time interval. Okay, so now we have this option that is exactly what we want, and then we can see if it works as we expect. Okay, so chunk time interval is now being passed, and we need to rename it from time bucket interval to chunk time interval. Yeah, keeping the names as they are in the API will make it much easier to maintain. So it was my mistake in the beginning. So let's try again. And now we have the 1 minute. Let's put it here like 1. Yeah, let's keep it 1 minute as my test is quite small. Polymorphic type because the input type is no. Okay, so let's discover what we did here. Okay, so chunk time interval is an interval, so we need to prefix it interval. Okay, that's a good call. Okay. this like hash rocket syntax in SQL is quite weird, especially like when you typecast with these commands, but it's very cool. Let's see how the commands will look like now. Okay. Okay, so now we have an interval of 1 minute, and if I try here chunk all again, I will see. Oh, maybe these chunks are, oh no, sorry. These chunks are from another hypertable because I'm getting chunk.all, and what I need here is event.chunks. Right. And now we have like a 1 minute table. Yeah, this database is a bit dirty. Sorry for that. It was a bit of confusion from my side, but yeah, now we get exactly what we want, and we have here the 1 minute based chunk. Okay, so so now as you can see, we can probably build some tests for it, as like this code is reusable and I missed the details out of it, so I was thinking like why, and so we have a lot of options here. We have options like boolean options, we have like partitioning column and other stuff, and I'm not going to cover them now because they are a lot, and we also need to have any a reasonable thing to do here. But yeah, as you can see now, it's much easier to continue, and I'd like to do some small refactor. I don't like to be repeating that much, especially here when we say hypertable options. I would like to just rename it to options, so it will be much easier to do. And the other thing we can do is also convert these params to let's say keyword arguments. As we know what keyword arguments we have, we can easily rename them. So let's say here we have time column, and we know the default is created at, and now we can just say here time column. Oops, sorry. Yeah, and we don't have the or clause anymore. And in the interval part, we can also just say chunk time interval, and we can keep the default that is like 1 week. Okay, and now you can just call it chunk time interval, and I break this as, even if this looks weird to you, to me it also looks weird, but as we have several options, let's go one by one and just remove compress segment by, and this is does not have any default, so I'm just going to bypass this, and the default here is nil because the person can just choose to not use compress segment by. And now we can also just say compress segment by here, and this is not like needed, let's say. And if we have like compression interval, so we can also just say compression interval, and we don't need it. Okay, so we need to just include compression interval, and it will also be new. And this is all we need for now. So we can just say here now param time column, and is yeah, I'm not going to document these params. They looks pretty obvious from this context. And yeah, maybe we can even create an example, but we can just see here, C create table, and with the hypertable options. Okay, so this is much easier to maintain, and it will also cover this let's say setup hypertable options. So here we have a problem because we are still bypassing this param, and we need to, let's say, turn it as we have it here. Like this double splat will do what we want. So let's just include the double splat, and then we'll probably have exactly the same thing. Let's see if we don't have any error. So the TDD is me. Yes, it works. So we just introduced these params, and now they are much easier to maintain and go through here. Like especially let's say these three, so they are clear to understand what everything do, and also easy to see it here. So yeah, so if anyone has any comments, any contribution, feel free to chat. I'm curious to see who is around. I'm also that was the main plan of this session. I'm going to see if we can introduce the other views that we have, because for example like when we compress data, we can also decompress, and we can check like compression status and other stuff. So for example, one of the options that we did here was like checking detailed size, and this is chunky detailed size is a kind of thing that could be very similar to the chunk that we have here. So we could use something similar, but we don't have access to this table name, because this is not a table name. This is a function that will build over several stuff. But we create this open struct. So for example, if I come here and say event dot detailed size, what I will see here is how much bytes I'm using and the total amount of bytes. And if, for example, I do here, for example, even I guess I just have one first dot, so I can say here dot compress. So now it's compressed, and then if I try here to check compression stats, I can see how much data I have before the compression, and I can also see how much data I have after the compression. In this case, the both data is showing exactly the same size. Probably it's because like this chunk is like 5 records, so it doesn't matter too much. But we have all these options available here. The only thing that is a bit weird is this like first dot number compressed chunk. So this is not like classes, but we are reusing the open struct here to just have access to this hash as a key value with like a method access. So that's what open struct is doing here for us. And yeah, so we have everything here, and this is day. So just recapitulating what we built here, we have 2 main classes. We have this let's say hypertable helpers. So we created a module and then a sub module. We also have this chunk. We can even think about it as an external file, but chunk is used here internally. So let's say we could say here require relative, and then we can say ask for chunk, and we can move this class outside. So if you get here chunk, let's say timescale chunk.rb, and we can just say module here, module timescale. So we have exactly the same map, and we are mapping the chunk, and then let's say it's being required by this helper, and it should work exactly as we want in the same way. Oops, I missed one end in the hypertable helpers. So let's go to hypertable helpers, and let's and that's some unacceptable error to our compiler. Okay, now the next one is chunk, and chunk is not available, so require relative chunk. Oh yeah, I say it's timescale chunk. Okay, and now let's try again, and everything is probably running. Yay! So let's recap. We have here this chunk that's a representation of some table, and this is like a helper that we can reuse in the hypertable helpers. So it requires the relative here, and you can also enhance it here. And extending active support concern, we are able to just build scopes here, and we were able to reuse it in this all-in-one file. So now the all-in-one file just includes the hypertable helpers. And in the other hand, we also have the timescale helpers that are injecting things on PostgreSQL adapter. So this is something that you can be, let's say, patch your default ecosystem to include these defaults. And you can see here like chunk time interval, compression interval, and so on. And and the all-in-one will be much simpler. You just include these options, and you can create the table with the hypertable options, and you can also benefit from these generated scopes that you have, and you can compress and decompress chunks and so on. So yeah, everything is now much better organized. These 3 files can be like dropped in a folder, and you can just reuse for today. So if you have any comments, any questions, just feel free to reach out. I am at Twitter as 𝗔𝗯ance_DP, and you can also find me easily on the community, on Islamity that we have on Timescale. So you can find me there if you want to give us any ideas or feedback for this work. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this. So see you soon.